You were taught to check your sources, to spot the logical fallacy, to separate fact from opinion. You do all of it. So why does the world still not make sense? Because you are not taught to think, you are taught to collect. You can be right about every fact and wrong about the world. That is not your fault. It's a switch that was never flipped. And this video flips it. Here's the promise. By the end, you will have one test you can run on any claim, any headline, any expert, and any person trying to convince you. You will stop collecting facts. You will start building a model. There is a version of thinking you were handed early. A claim appears. You ask who said it. You ask if the source is credible. You look for the bias. You find the flaw and you name it. A domino. He attacked the person, not the point. Straw man. He twisted the words. False equivalence. He called both sides the same. You feel the small satisfaction of being right. Then you move to the next claim and the next. This is called critical thinking. It's taught in schools. It's sold by media literacy programs. And it has a problem. You can do every step correctly and still end up with a pile of verified pieces that tells you nothing about what is actually happening. To be fair, there is a formal definition. The consensus version lists 6 skills: interpretation, analysis, evaluation, inference, explanation, and self-regulation, checking your own reasoning for bias. That is a serious list, right? And every item on it happens after the claim is already in your hands. Not one asks where the claim came from. Not one asks what it lets you predict. The best definition we have describes a careful inspector standing at the end of a conveyor belt he didn't build. There is a word the education system never gave you. Factology. Factology is the collection of facts detached from the processes that produce them. A school doesn't teach you to model how a thing works. It teaches you to remember what a thing is. It hands you the label and calls it knowledge. This is not an accident of bad teaching. It's the design. Facts are the cheapest thing to teach. A fact is a fixed point. You can test it with a multiple choice question. A process cannot be tested that way. A process has to be understood. So the system, which must grade millions cheaply, teaches facts. Not because facts matter, because facts are gradable. And that is not a figure of speech. In 1914, Frederick Kelly wrote a doctoral thesis about the problem. 2 teachers would mark the same work and give it to different grades. His solution was the first multiple choice test, the Kansas silent reading test. 16 passages, 5 minutes. The student writes nothing, and anyone can score it by running an eye down the page. Built for speed, built for scale. In the same decade, Ford put up the moving assembly line. Years later, as a university president, Kelly said the thing should be abandoned. It measured only a small part of what was actually being taught. The tool stayed. His objection didn't. And before you blame the person who taught you, don't. Your favorite teacher was taught the same way. They handed you the only map they were given. That is not education. That is encoding. And its product is a person who is informed but doesn't comprehend. You studied history, chemistry, and literature in separate rooms. But the world is not made of separate rooms. The world is one connected system. The school never handed you the connections. So you learned to hold 1,000 pieces and never learned to see the picture. Now the metaphor that holds it together. Take a kaleidoscope. Inside the colored pieces of glass, they have no stable connections to each other. Every turn scatters them into a new pattern. And most of what you see is not even the glass, it's the reflection of the glass in mirrors. Now take a mosaic. Every piece is fixed in relation to every other piece. Remove one and you can see exactly what it was connected to. The image holds together. It means something. Most people don't have mosaic. They have a kaleidoscope. 1,000 verified facts. No connections between them. And the connections are the only part that matters, because that is where the cause lives. This is where the second version of critical thinking appears, the social media version. Do your own research. Here's what that phrase means. Open a feed, find a clipping, find another clipping that agrees with it, screenshot, share. A kaleidoscope of clippings. You didn't build a model of anything. You rearranged pieces of glass. And the feed is very good at deciding which pieces reach you first. Same disease, two symptoms. The school version. Collect facts, never connect them. The social version. Collect clippings, never model them. Both leave you holding verified pieces and no idea what holds them together. There is one more layer, and this is the one that explains everything. You are handed a map of the world with the real control centers erased. Look at the arguments you are allowed to have. Left or right, this side or that side. You can spend your whole life arguing about it. And the live script underneath doesn't change, because those arguments don't touch the layer where the script is actually written. Think of a piece of candy in the wrapper. The wrapper is the ideology, the colors, the label, the argument. The candy is the thing itself. And while you argue about the color of the wrapper, you are eating the candies that was prepared for you. The wrapper is what you are allowed to fight over. The candy is never discussed. There is a name for the layer that decides the candy. Conceptual power. I made a full video on it, and it's linked in the description. Here it matters for one reason. The person who writes the questions writes the script. And that is the connection back to you. Every answer you have ever given was an answer to a question someone else chose. So the real skill was never evaluating answers. It was building questions. Here's the foundation underneath all of it. Everything that exists can be seen through three things. Matter, the thing itself. Information, the meaning it carries. And measure, the proportion, the boundary, the relationship between them. Matter, information, measure. You already feel this. You call it a sense of proportion. You can tell when a story is too clean, too convenient, when the numbers don't add up, when the pieces don't fit. That feeling is not superstition. It's your own discernment. The ability to tell this from not this. The kaleidoscope mind ignores that feeling because it's too busy collecting. The mosaic mind uses it. And that brings us to the tool, the one test I promised you at the start. 2,500 years ago, Socrates helped invent an art, finding truth by asking questions in a sequence. They called it dialectics, not debate, not argument, dialectics. You ask a question, the answer opens a new question. That answer opens another. You keep going until the chain of answers is good enough to act on. The modern mind does this backwards. It starts from an answer and works backward to defend it. That is why it can hold 100 verified facts and no model. It never built the chain of questions. So here is the test. When any information reaches you, a headline, a study, a claim, a person, don't begin with, is this true? Begin with this. Does this information let me predict the consequences of my actions? That is the whole filter. If accepting a claim lets you see what happens next, if you can build with it, act on it, foresee the end of the process, then it's knowledge. It becomes a piece of your mosaic. If it doesn't, if the claim gives you nothing to build with, nothing to predict, only a feeling of being informed, then it's not knowledge. It's programming, a piece of glass. Then ask the next question, not the question the claim wants you to answer, the question behind it. Why is this being said now? What has to be true for this to be true? What would I see if the opposite were true? Most people stop after one question. They accept the first answer that feels right and call it critical thinking. But one question is not thinking. It's collecting with a step in front of it. The sequence is the method. The person who controls the first question controls the whole chain. So the filter is two questions, not one. Does this let me predict? And then, what question is this answering? And what question is it avoiding? The first tests the claim. The second tests the frame the claim arrived in. None of this requires a degree. It requires a shift in what you think thinking is for. Thinking is not for winning arguments. It's not for being right about the facts. It's for building a model of the world that lets you see what is coming before it arrives. A mosaic can predict. A kaleidoscope can only scatter. If you saw yourself in any of this, understand, this is not a verdict. It's the first win. Admitting you were taught to think this way is the moment the switch starts to flip. I did the same. I'm still building my mosaic. You are not behind. You are exactly where everyone starts. Everything in this video is the map, drawn small. Every idea here, Factology, the kaleidoscope, the trinity of matter, information, and measure, has its own video on this channel, where it goes deeper. If you want the full picture on any of it, tell me in the comments which part to open up next. A kaleidoscope was assembled. Anything that was assembled can come apart. A mosaic goes together, one connected piece at a time. There is an old rule that says it plainly. Everyone, to the extent of their understanding, works for themselves, and to the extent of their misunderstanding, works for whoever understands more. But if the question decides the answer, if the first layer of your thinking runs the rest, then it raises a harder question. Where does that layer get written? Not in one place, in 6. 6 levels of control that run a society, from the ones everyone can see to the ones that never get argued about. That video is already on my channel. It's the one to watch next. Thank you.